Yes, you were just asking if this is a video podcast. Well, it's kind of both. It's a hybrid. This records video, and I put the video on YouTube, and then I put the audio as a podcast, so people have all the options. That's exciting.
And
So I
then
don't.
you just froze.
Oh no, did I? Let's see. Can you
Oh,
still
there you
see
go.
me? Am I moving?
Yeah, you came back. Just
All
froze
right.
for a moment.
Well, the good thing about recording with this software is that it's recording on your end and it's recording on my end, and at the end it'll give us the merged like files. So like even if there's a bad connection, it's not like a Skype call where it's like it'll cut out.
That
Oh,
is the sweetest thing I've ever heard. So
yeah.
Riverside is that platform. You like them?
Yes, I will. I will add my affiliate link to the description of the podcast, so I can make like 5 cents
Please
if somebody
do. Yeah.
somebody uses it. Yeah, I just started using it. I think I bought it around Christmas because I got an email from them with a discount. And I was like, you know what? I was thinking of using this anyway, so that
Great.
works out.
Nice.
I will quickly introduce you for people who are like, what is going on? We have with us Scott Dikkers, who's like a famous, like a legend in comedy who founded like the website The Onion and everything. And okay, so that's the introduction. So people go, oh, now they're like, we should be listening. And then also my little technique these days is to just start recording right away, and then we'll just see what
Sure.
happens. Because sometimes you get a little, a little fun where you start raw.
Absolutely. And I see that I am much more orange than you are, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, I know. It's you never know. Are you using
I don't.
the built-in webcam?
Yeah, just my
Yeah.
computer camera. Pretty
Yes.
comfy. Yeah.
So that's what I was using as well. I just bought a new MacBook Air,
That's
but
what
I
I'm on. Yeah.
yeah. So they've got like a 720p built-in webcam because I didn't want to. I couldn't just. I don't. The MacBook Pro just sounded like too much. But I've still got an old Logitech 1080p webcam that I plug in. So now I'm higher definition, and
That's smart.
yeah.
I ought to
But
consider that.
yeah, no, that's all right. I mean, we look kind of similar anyways. So if people just want to pretend,
Very
you know,
similar.
this is what
Yeah.
you would look like. I have glasses though.
Yeah.
I haven't worn them in. I mean, they're kind of new. Like as of this week, I'm a bit frustrated because I got like LASIK eye surgery like 20 years ago, and I thought, oh, finally, I'll be free from glasses.
So
They don't
what
tell you,
hap-
yeah,
what
they don't tell you that your eyesight will get bad again, and you're like, wait, what? So now I've hacked up my eyes, and I have to wear glasses. So I've been fighting it. Even I got them, and I haven't put them on for a few weeks, but I finally put them on. I'm like, like
I was
it's
always suspicious of that LASIK eye surgery. I never had to get it. I don't need glasses, but
wow.
going in and getting a laser to cut your eyes, I was like, nah, I don't think so. I think I'll stick with
Yeah.
assuming at some point I'll need glasses. Yeah, I knew that was coming. It's almost like at any moment they're going to pass the IRAs don't count rule, and all our money that we put into our retirement accounts when we were at our 9-to-5 jobs is just, somebody's just going to take all that money and they're not going to give us anything.
Wait, what?
Yeah, it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Oh, the don't
Or
count.
Social Security. That's the other one. Social Security.
Oh yeah,
We're going to get to a certain age and they're like, nah, we're not going to do this program
just kidding.
anymore.
But you're
Yeah.
like, but I've been paying into this for like 60 years. Well,
Sorry.
maybe
You know.
you should have saved some in the piggy bank.
Exactly.
Well, it's all scary because you just assume, you make money and it's good and everything. But even in Canada recently, when there was the trucker protest and Justin Trudeau said, you know what, actually, we're just going to hack into everybody's bank accounts and freeze those and take your crypto. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Oh
You
my
know?
goodness, yeah. It's a very dicey thing to trust that people are out there taking care of me. Everything's going to be okay. At the end of the day, you can pretty much count on people taking advantage of you.
Yes. I think I saw, I can't remember who it was recently, but they posted on Facebook or Instagram just saying something oh no, it was, it's one of these famous longevity doctors, I think. And for some reason he was saying, I've learned in my life that people are mean. There's mean people out there. People are going to take advantage of you. You're on your own. Do not count on anyone.
And that's when there's a civilization that's functioning. Imagine when there's no civilization functioning. Like, people are just going to turn into vicious, wild beasts.
Oh, yeah. I listen to the James Altucher podcast every day. Do you know that guy?
Yeah, he's a crypto guy.
He's big into crypto. He started
Yeah.
sort of doing financial advice and everything,
Okay.
and now he's written a bunch of books on being creative, following your passion. Even speaking of comedy, he bought a comedy club and was doing stand up for 6 years.
Oh my goodness! I know James. Is he the guy who stays in Airbnbs all the time? He doesn't own a home.
You know what? If you had asked me that like 2 days ago, I would have been like, "What are you talking about?" But actually, in a podcast I listened to this week, he said that's what he was doing. Like there was like he wanted to. He was talking to a guy, and one guy said he's trying to live in different neighborhoods in New York to experience them, and James was like, "No, that's what I did. I sold all my possessions, and I was Airbnb-ing in different like places all the time."
Right.
And it must have been fairly recent because Airbnb isn't even that old. And then but I think he's living in, and that's what he was talking about, how he's moved from New York, and he wrote a big article about why he's getting the heck out of New York, and he lives in Georgia now, I think.
Oh my goodness.
He's a multimillionaire now, but his whole show is about how he goes broke and makes money again and goes broke, and so I guess he's at a money stage, and hopefully he's learned his lesson at this point.
Hope so.
But he did one episode that I listened to recently where he's interviewing a guy. It was about survivalism. It was written a book about how to survive in the apocalypse or something, and he was saying, the second society starts to collapse, what skills do you have that are useful? Like nobody's going to be like, we need a comedian. They'll be like, are you an electrician, or how effective are you with a machete? And what you need to do is sort of, to prepare now, you want to build a community of people that kind of like you and trust you, so that when things go to crap, they're like, all right, you know what? I won't eat you. We can stick together. So it's kind of scary.
Yeah.
'Cause,
do you know how to identify edible plants?
Mm,
So that when you escape into the Rocky Mountain National Forest Preserve or whatever, you're going to be able to survive.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
Eating dandelion greens.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like you start to think about, and what James was saying is like none of his skills are useful in a
Right.
society like that. Like,
Oh yeah.
100 years ago we'd be useless. And even today, I was listening to Kathy Heller interview Pete Holmes, and he was saying, "I'm happy to be living in 2022, where being a comedian is a valued thing." And people are like, "Oh, tell us about your diarrhea routine." He's like, "If it was 100 years ago, you'd be interviewing a steel miner or something. Like it's,
Right.
So, yeah, it kind of scares me, the thought of the thin veneer. But you know what? I guess if things go to crap, we're all kind of screwed. It's not like, oh, if only I had learned swordplay,
No.
Yeah.
It's going to be a giant crapshoot. So.
Well, the other thing, I don't know why we're talking about this, but it doesn't matter. The guy, the apocalypse guy was saying is that even rich people, the second things, money has no value or whatever, you think, oh, I've got security. No, security will be like, why are we taking care of you? Like, if they like you, they'll keep you alive. But if they don't, they're like, you know what? Okay, you're dead, and we'll just take over your mansion. And it, kind of becomes, I guess, what's going on in Ukraine now. It's just like there's no laws.
We'll just keep you for, we'll cut off a limb and eat it every once in a while. Just keep you alive.
Oh, yeah. That's just to slowly, like what they do in the movie Seven or something. Let's kill you as slowly as possible.
Right.
That's not pleasant. So if anybody was thinking, oh, this episode should be fun, we're talking comedy. But it's interesting how dark. Well,
there's an old adage in Hollywood: don't ever invite a comedy writer to your party, because they just bring everything down.
Yeah, that's what I'm starting to learn. Like even in my comedy, I'm taking some stand-up comedy classes in person and stuff, and I keep thinking, oh, this will be good. Like I'll be around funny people, but everybody's dark and talking about how they were abused or they're scared
you
of
cut
getting
out
old.
again there.
Oh,
But,
sorry. You're frozen as well. If you can hear me, that
every
should be okay.
comedian got into comedy. Oh.
Yeah. If you can still hear me, we should be good.
Got into comedy. I can hear you now, but you were cut out for a while. You probably can't hear me, though.
I can hear you. Sorry, I'm talking over
I'm
you.
back. Okay, that's okay.
All right.
So, but no, I was saying everybody who got into comedy for a reason, usually because they have some crippling depression and they turn to comedy as a way to cope or, to make life a little more enjoyable. And so underneath all the laughs, there's usually some pretty heavy darkness.
Yeah, because I remember when I started taking classes at the beginning of the pandemic with Greg Dean. Do you know that guy?
Yeah, I know Greg Dean.
Yeah, so yeah, he doesn't teach them directly on Zoom, but his wife does, and other people. And I was like saying, is it okay? Like I'm kind of treating this as therapy. Like, is it? Oh no, I said, is it going to be effective? Like, is it going to make me feel better? He's like, yeah, no, it will. Like everybody's here, kind of unloading their crap.
Yeah, some people need that. Like they need the comedy outlet to make life worthwhile. So
yeah,
the people who oftentimes have the most powerful need end up being the most hardworking and ambitious comedians. So the people who have really succeeded big, I always, I have a podcast, the comedy podcast I do. I have two. One is How to Write Funny, where I interview people in comedy, and I'm always interested in digging into, like, why did they get into comedy? What motivated them to do it? And so often it's like emotional trauma, nobody loved me as a kid, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And so they need it. And when that urge is so powerful, you really need comedy, and you need to succeed at it in order to get some kind of love and attention and validation from the world,
Yeah, well, what Pete Holmes was saying in the episode I was listening to today was saying that at first he did look to external validation from the entertainment world and do people love me, but he's realized you'll just get burned, so he has to do his meditation and look for internal joy in this and that, and do the comedy.
Yeah.
You can't be relying on that for your...
Yeah, that fuel of emotional trauma can sometimes get you to break through the Earth's atmosphere. Like you get to the first level of success in comedy, and then you start getting adulation and awards and a big audience, and then you realize, oh my God, that's not filling the hole. And I was talking to Chevy Chase about this, who was abused horribly as a child, and he said, oh yeah, you can't fill the hole. You can't fill the hole. It was just so obvious to him. And you see these tragic stories of people like Chris Farley, who never got past that stage of trying to fill the hole with comedy, But Chevy Chase has been around a long time. Like he learned how to fill the hole through other things, through he stopped doing movies for a long time just to spend time with his family, because that's where he found meaning and healing. And so unless you're getting therapy, unless you're working on yourself, like you said, meditation, there's so many other things people can do. You're going to be stuck in that horrible state of, oh, I need to get some sort of artificial love and attention from an audience that's never going to fill the hole, but it's the closest thing I can think of to what I need. And it's a dead end. It doesn't work. You immediately realize you need something more meaningful and richer and more healing, and that can only come from self-work, self-examination, therapy, personal, intimate connections that you have. That's it. That's all you got.
Yeah, Pete was also saying, he owes Jim Carrey money for using this quote all the time, but it was Jim Carrey saying, I wish everybody could become rich and famous so they would know that's not the answer, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then, I always want to say, well, okay, I'll try that out. How bad could it be? But, yeah, I can imagine. Because, I think, Pete was also saying he got advice from, I don't know, some kind of guru guy who was saying, you're shooting a TV show now. Don't wait until, hopefully it'll get good reviews or you'll win an award from it or whatever. No, now's the time. Enjoy the fact that you're shooting a show with friends and you can pick up your daughter at the end of the day. There's not something to look forward to. And I had an article cut out on my dorm room wall in university. Some woman wrote an article saying, we keep rushing through life. We just keep thinking that, once I graduate school, life begins, or when I get married, or when I have the first kid or the second kid, or get the promotion, or when I retire. And then you look back and you're like, no, that was life. That was all. There isn't a moment that you're rushing towards, but it's really hard to do.
That's how we're wired. We're always thinking, I'll be happy when X, Y, and Z happens. No, be happy now. This is it, and it's about the journey. There's no destination. Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know how to embrace that, but I'm trying. I look for things that make me and doing the podcast makes me happy. Just talking to you takes me out of my own head for a few minutes and makes me feel I'm doing something. And I was thinking, because I was thinking today on my jog while listening to that podcast, I'm like, well, what makes me happy? I was stupid. I never got married, never had kids. Now I look back, I'm like, oh, that's what I should have, at least would have been meaningful, not I got to be a famous comedian first and then do that.
Well, it's never too late.
Yeah, well, that's what I hope to hear.
Yeah, no, I did the same thing recently. I haven't been doing comedy for a long time. I left The Onion in 2014, and I've been teaching comedy. I set up this program at the Second City, and now I'm doing it on my own online. And I missed, occasionally I would do some comedy, I would do a book or whatever, but I missed doing it regularly and having a deadline. And so I signed up to do this weekly podcast. This is my second podcast, which I'm going to change the name of, but it's presently called Scott Dikkers Shows Up, where I just try to be funny for 20 minutes in front of the camera. And it's really challenging, and it's like doing new material every week. And I do animation, I do impressions, I still tell stories, and it's so fulfilling. And like, when you do this sort of thing and you don't have a big platform, you know, I spent my whole career building the Onion's platform, so I don't really have a personal platform of any kind. When you start out and you're just like in the beginning stages of building something, it can seem really lonely, like, nobody cares, nobody's watching or whatever. And you have to have that feeling of like, well, I love this, so I don't give a rat's ass if nobody's watching it. I'm doing it because it's fun, it's meaningful to me, and I'm going to keep doing it. It's like performing in front of the mirror when you're a kid. Nobody saw that stuff. Nobody was liking or subscribing, but you did it because you loved it and you needed it. And so I find it immensely fulfilling, and I'm excited about it. I'm in my next episode, I think, is episode 8, so I'm in the very beginnings of this show.
That's amazing. Yeah, like Pete was talking about how he was lucky enough or smart enough to recognize that, hey, I like doing comedy, and that was kind of his passion, and that people should find what that thing is that lights you up.
Right.
And, you know, I found a cassette tape a couple of years ago that I was like, who's this girl? But I guess it was me talking just before puberty, but, you know, maybe 11 or 12 years old, recording on my tape deck, doing in probably 1984, like, it was just like a radio show. Hey, everybody, it's my radio show. And I interviewed my sister, and then
That's awesome.
And then I switched to the radio to play music. Okay, we're back. And that tells me, like, what was I going to do with this cassette tape? Probably nobody's ever heard it.
No.
But I mean, if you can find something that you were doing anyways for no reason, and in university I filmed comedy skits with my friend's VHS camera, and we edited it, and I lost the tape of the edits, and he's got the old footage, so I'm trying to get that back from him. But again, nobody was ever going to see that other than the girls I showed it to in the res room once.
Yeah.
But it's exciting now, because I used to, around that age, I started hosting community cable shows, and okay, a bit more of an audience, but they had to see it live at that moment. But here we can, you know, we can do it live from our phone to conceivably the whole world, and it's exciting. So it's lucky that we.
It's an amazing opportunity
to
get your stuff out there. It's like nothing I've ever seen right now.
And it's interesting too, because I notice. I mean, there's obviously so many people on TikTok and Instagram doing little sketches and stuff, and it used to be kind of, I guess you had to be super passionate like us, like, okay, we're going to get a camera and film something because we're comedians, but now almost anybody can, hey, I'm just going to lip sync to this song or this dialogue, which shows, I guess, that a lot of people have that desire, and it just had to become technically possible.
Yeah, and so a lot of people might be daunted by that, thinking, well, everybody's doing it, you know, how can I possibly compete? But again, it's not about that. It's about, do you like it? Do you enjoy it?
Yeah.
And just do it anyway. It doesn't matter that you're in a sea of a billion. Like, I still believe that the internet is a meritocracy, and if you're doing something that people like, they'll find it, and that'll be icing on the cake, you know? You're doing it for yourself because you love it, great. You're done, you've succeeded, that's all you need. Then people like it and they want to see more from you. Then you just start to feel like, oh my God, I won the lottery, or I plugged into some miracle life-giving serum that I didn't know existed.
Yeah, because I was thinking.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Well, I was thinking. All right, here I'll go.
You go.
I was just going to say that yesterday I was. A woman was asking me what my show's about or whatever, and I was like, I don't know. Like, originally I thought I was going to interview celebrities and be like, oh, I'm Perez Hilton, and all the stars will come on, like Mark Maron's show. Mm-hmm. And then it just sort of became, I'm talking to people, learning about their jobs or their tips on stress. And I'm like, okay, it's kind of like I'm self-helping myself and learning. And she's like, oh, have you ever thought about talking current events? I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't want to alienate my audience, like, by talking politics or whatever. And she's like, but it's your show. And then I realized, yeah, you know what? I mean, why am I putting pressure on myself to be like, oh, it better be in a niche and it has to... It's like, why can't I just talk like I'm 12 years old speaking into a tape deck, and today my show is it's me talking about what I read in the newspaper, or today it's like me just reading my jokes that I wrote. Like, why do I care what anybody's thinking? Like, you can make money in other ways. You don't have to be like, this podcast better make $1 million. Like, do your whatever your job is, and then if you want to talk to yourself on your podcast, go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah, I was going to say the Onion was that exactly. Like, it was a publication that we put out every week in print starting in 1988, and we made just enough money selling local advertising to pay for the printing costs, and we just kept doing it every week. And occasionally you'd get something, you know, that people would like. They'd clip it out, hang it on their dorm room doors or whatever, but it didn't really feel like we were making a splash. Like, no big magazine distribution company was coming to offer to buy us or distribute us on newsstands or anything. Yeah. It was self-distributed, you know, hand-delivered on the street. And we did that for years and just, you know, broke even selling local ads. And everyone who worked on it had that feeling of like, well, we just love this. This is like so fun. This is like the center of our lives. Couldn't imagine doing anything else. And the fact that we were able to make money, like to just kind of cover the expenses, was pretty miraculous to us. So after maybe eight or so years, the internet came along. We put what we were doing in the paper online, and it was so early. It was the first humor website ever, theonion.com. And suddenly everybody was noticing, and everybody was like, the New Yorker wrote a piece about us, and we got news stations like CNN called us, wanted to come do a story about us, and started getting a lot of attention just because we were a new thing. But that's not why we did it. We did it because we loved it, and we were just putting it wherever we could get it. The internet came along, we're like, oh, there's another place where we can distribute it. Let's put it on there. We weren't even thinking about it.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of when I teach this stuff, that's kind of what I tell people. You have to do it for the love of it. You have to put it out there because you love doing it. And if you want to be successful, like, you can listen to the audience and you can care what they think, and you can try to like tweak what you're doing so that that Venn diagram of the stuff you like and the stuff they like meets in the middle, and you've got this area where you've got overlap. That's the winning formula. Or if you just want to be an artist, you just want to do like performance art, you just do what you like, don't care at all what people think, and just keep doing your thing. Just don't spend a lot of money on it, bootstrap it, don't mortgage the farm. You know, so many people, like in certain media, let's say film, they realize, oh, I want to make a film. That means I have to spend $400,000 to make a good-looking, releasable film. It's a terrible, terrible idea. Make a film on your iPhone for $20.
Yeah.
There's nothing stopping you. Why can't you do that? Don't spend $400,000. You know, Robert Rodriguez made El Mariachi for $7,000. That's the most I would ever recommend anybody spend on a feature film. But you should just do it because you love it. And again, he's another example of that. He just made movies because he loved making movies, and he was going to make them one way or another, you know.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like, you hear these stories about how, you know, Steven Spielberg making movies in his backyard, and it used to be that's kind of the rare thing because you had to have $2,000 to buy a camera, and what's the point of this? But now literally everybody can make a movie with their phone, so it opens that up. Like, even 5 years ago, I was talking to my friend Tony, who's a voice actor, and he moved to New York, and I'm like, oh, we should do a podcast together. And he was looking into software. Okay, it's going to cost $5,000 for this special software so we can record each other talking. And now you can do it over Skype on your phone for free, so why not? And even when my dad says, well, why are you doing this? Is it making money? You spend time on it? I'm like, well, I mean, you know, it's going to take me however long we talk. That's how long it took me. I'm not going to edit this. I'm just uploading it. So, you know, some people talk to their friends on the phone for an hour. I'm doing that, but recording it, like, and why not? You know, I enjoy it. And
my dad asked me, you know, how are you monetizing this about my new podcast? And I'm thinking, oh my God, he's a baby boomer. He's 80.
Yeah.
Oh, he's a pre-baby boomer. He's actually older than the baby boomers. But I'm thinking, that's so sad that, like, even he thinks that way. No, I'm just doing it because I need to do it and I love doing it. And if it ever makes money, great. But I'm going to rely on the things that I'm already doing to make a living, to make money. But anything new that I try like this, it can't be necessarily like, how can I make money at this? The love of it has to come first. The money, if there's any money that might ever come of it, that has to be an afterthought. That's the only way I know how to do things.
I remember, I can't remember exactly what he was talking about, but Ty Lopez, who's this big sort of financial guru.
I know Ty Lopez. I see his ads all the time.
Exactly. He
showing me his Lamborghini or whatever.
Yeah, here's all the books in my garage that taught me all this information.
He reads a book a day, yeah.
Yeah, and now he's got a business where you get his mentor box with the book a month or 11 books a month. But he said something about how you don't, just because you have something, you don't have to make money from that. Like, you might have a condo, and you're like, you don't have to make money Airbnb-ing out the spare room. You can make money other ways. Like, not everything you do has to make the money. And it probably wasn't exactly what we're talking about, but it kind of made me realize, oh, right. Like, I couldn't, it's everybody says, oh, you got to monetize your passions. You shouldn't waste it. But it's like, no, you could, have your day job or whatever you do for money. And then if you enjoy doing the podcast, that doesn't have to be your source of money. Of course, ideally, if you can spend all your time doing the one thing. But yeah, I think it can be an external thing that you do for the love. And yeah, I don't know. My dad's like 75, so I don't know why he's on that train too. Because on the one hand, he's like, oh, yeah, you're making money from it. And the other hand, he's like, why are you working on the internet stuff? You think does anybody make money on the internet? I'm like, well, that's the only way to, like, what are you going to start a car factory? But
bookbinding business. That's the ticket.
Yeah, and it's Ty Lopez that actually says, look at the top 10 people on the Forbes richest list. They're all e-commerce. It's all Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates. That's kind of where, and not that, you need to be the richest man in the world, but it's not a bad idea to look at, okay, how can I monetize what I'm doing online?
Yeah.
Because, yeah, it's harder. Like, anybody can start an online business. It's harder to say I'm going to start a coal mine or something. But because I remember I was getting emails from my friend Adrian for, like, I guess this was probably the year 2000. I remember I was working at Saatchi & Saatchi, and he would email like every week or something, like this really funny article or news thing, and I thought he was writing them because he would just cut and paste it into this thing, and I'm like, Jesus, he's really funny, like, these are hilarious. It was only after a year or two I realized, wait, like, it was The Onion. I discovered the website. I'm like, he's copying and pasting these articles, so that was kind of disillusioning. But then I started going to the website all the time, and I was like, this is the funniest thing I've ever seen, and it makes me so happy because there was nothing like it online, and it was just, it just took the piss out of everything. Like, when you say we, like, who started it in 1988? Did you have friends that you're like, I'm going to do this with?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for the kind words. But yeah, so these two guys, Tim Keck and Chris Johnson, founded it. They were like the original, it was their idea, and they were like really smart, like business-minded guys who had this idea to start a newspaper. Tim Keck came from a newspaper family, so he kind of knew how that business worked. And they approached me before issue 1 to see if I wanted to be involved because I had a very popular comic strip on the UW-Madison campus at the time called Jim's Journal that everybody wore the T-shirts, and like I had a book collection come out that made the New York Times bestseller list. So I was like a local comedy celebrity, Wow. And so I really was impressed with these guys, and I wanted to work with them, but I didn't want to do my comic strip in this new publication because it was doing fine in the sort of already established student newspaper of the campus. So I did like 3 other comic strips for them with different drawing styles, different names, so it would look like I had this impressive stable of cartoonists,
Yeah.
And then after about issue 3, I realized like they were doing everything themselves. They were running ragged. They were barely sleeping. It's a lot of work to like sell all the ads, lay the whole paper out and everything.
Wow.
I kind of volunteered to take on a more editorial role and started coming up with ideas for stories and helping to write. They had one writer who like was an improv guy, and they would just put him in front of the computer and he would write until the column inches were full. He would just improvise in print. And it was, it was pretty sloppy, and I fancied myself a professional comedy writer, so I was like, no, here's how you do it. And so I kind of brazenly strode in and was trying to tell him how to do things. Anyway, cut to a few months later, Tim and Chris decide they want out. And so they sell it to me and their top ad sales guy and their top production. Well, there only one production guy, meaning he knew how to use the computer. So we became the owners, and then we bought out that third guy, the production guy. So it was just the business guy and the creative guy, me and my partner. And we, ran the Onion up until I think about the year 2000, building the audience and building the team of writers and developing the Onion's voice. And when I say we, I mean it was very separate. He basically sold ads, and I ran the creative part of it. And it was very much like the formation of a rock band where people found us and seemed to be of like mind and showed up at the office and wanted to be involved. And I would typically try anybody, I'd try to write some jokes, see how you do, and if they were funny, I'd invite them to the weekly meeting. And then if you kept coming to the weekly meeting, pretty much you were kind of considered part of the team and on staff. But it was really tough. We didn't really pay people anything. It was like $5 a week to come to the meeting.
Yeah.
And so they didn't really do a lot except come up with ideas. They didn't write stories. That fell to the editor, and that was me for so many years, just having to write every story or at least rewrite terrible first drafts of stories that they would submit. And then, as time went on, the staff got bigger, and you would find people that you could delegate to who actually could learn how to write in the Onion style and help edit stories, write stories that were in pretty good shape from the get-go, so you wouldn't have to do a lot of rewriting. And pretty soon you've got a functioning team. So by the time you saw it, it was a pretty well-oiled machine.
Yeah, I remember. For some reason, I remember stories of people handing out newspapers or something. I think I used to look for it, in bookstores in Toronto, or trying to find this thing.
Yeah.
Wow. And then what happened? Eventually you left it, because I know it got sort of so big that it was like a TV show. There was the fake morning show videos.
Right.
The videos really. I guess maybe I remember when those started coming out. Wow, this is up to the next level now.
Right. So yeah, I would step back and I would go and I would make a movie and then I would come back, and this happened a lot. And I would always go, and then the staff would just kind of keep things running. They wouldn't ever start anything new or do anything new. And every time I would come back, I would always be bored with it. I go, let's do something new. So I would come back and we would do a book, do our first book.
Right.
And then I came back again and it was like, we're doing a podcast. Let's start a podcast. Then I came back in the mid-2000s and I was like, we're doing web video. And so we hired this whole team and created the videos you're talking about, ONN, Onion News Network.
Yeah, because I remember there was little clips. It was or just audio clips. And I'm trying to remember the things. I was like, oh, that's so cool. Yeah, it's the Onion News. What else was there? There was.
Well, the morning show was Today Now. That was a good one. And they were really expensive to make, and we wanted them to look really authentic and really real, because at that time the Daily Show and the Colbert Show were already doing news parody or fake news on TV.
Yeah.
And when we started doing the videos, a lot of people in the entertainment business, and we had moved to New York at this point, were telling us, don't try to compete with those guys. They're doing great. And I was thinking, no, we're going to do something different. We're not going to have a host who's your buddy who's chuckling at this stuff. We're going to make it seem like a real news network with real anchors who all exist in this fake reality.
Yeah.
And so it took a lot of money to make that happen, to make it look really authentic. And
yeah, because they looked slick. Most stuff online.
Really slick. Yeah. So
where did you find the morning show host? It was that guy.
Oh my God, yeah, they were amazing. Yeah.
And that woman.
So we did casting calls, and we hired a lot of people who had worked in TV before. That guy had hosted a local morning show, I think in Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And so they already knew kind of how to be. And a lot of the news anchors we hired for the news segments were people who had done local news or had done news. Only a couple of them were actors. Because one thing always bothered me about, in movies, when they have the scene where there's a news anchor on the screen doing the
Yeah.
exposition, or there's a local reporter at the scene. We're here at the scene of this grisly crime.
Yeah.
They always look fake. They always look like actors. And that's because they don't hire real people who do real news, because there's a certain way that news people do news. You can't teach an actor how to do that. You have to get a real news person. So we got those people, and they were great because, and we learned that doing our podcast, the Onion Radio News. We hired a guy who did AM news for years on AM radio.
Yeah, he had that deep radio voice.
Deep,
Sounded
straight voice, never cracking, never breaking.
Yeah.
But in his spare time, he was a cartoonist, and a really well-known cartoonist, P.S. Mueller. And so he got the humor, and he knew how straight he needed to sound in order for the jokes to work, and he could play with it.
Yeah.
So he sort of had a Leslie Nielsen quality, where he's a serious actor who knew how to do comedy because he could play it so straight. That's part of what made it so funny. So we would hire people like that. And then the other factor was the actualities. So those are the people in the street that you're interviewing, the actors other than the news anchors who are part of a news clip,
Yeah.
And for those people, we did open casting calls for actors. But actors don't do that stuff very well. They always sound like they're reading lines. So you either make them improvise, or you give them a line and you write a bunch of stuff in the line that you don't need, that you're going to cut, and then you just edit out the part that you want so that they don't emphasize it for comedy. Because if they're reading comedy, they'll emphasize the punchline. But you want the punchlines to be de-emphasized in order to work. So that was a trick we would always use. We'd add a line at the end of every joke so they wouldn't think that was the punchline. So they would just breeze through it to get to the punchline. They would put all their energy in this punchline that we were just going to cut, this punchline.
Right.
And so that really helped a lot of those things work and be funny. And then there's one other thing we did for those types of people is that we would cast just regular people on the street who had no acting ability, homeless people who looked amazing, who looked the part. I remember we did a story about how a porn actress had used the N-word, had called her partner the N-word in a scene. And it was a big scandal in the porn industry, all totally made up, totally fake. But we found this sleazy-looking guy hanging out outside a convenience store in Brooklyn, and it was like, he's perfect. We got to get him to be a fan who's commenting on this story. So we go up to him, and instead of giving him a line, we pretend the story's real, and we tell him, "Hey, did you hear about this famous porn actress who called her co-star the N-word? What do you have to say about it?" And he gave us his honest opinion, because people will pretend they know. They'll pretend they know about the story.
Well, that's the whole Jimmy Kimmel,
Exactly.
lying news. Yeah.
Exactly. So then you get him to sign a release, and he's in the show, and he looks 1,000% authentic, better than Marlon Brando, because he's literally like being himself.
Wow. That's
So we had a lot of tricks for getting those to work.
Yeah, because I mean that was the thing. The Onion's always famous for people in other countries thinking this is a real news story, whether it was print or probably I think people were sharing those videos around, like look at this morning show, like about this murderer or whatever.
And we never wanted people to take it seriously and believe it. We just wanted it to be really, really funny, because the more authentic it is, the funnier the parody is. I learned that lesson from the National Lampoon. They really upped the ante on parody, and they would design that famous piece, Michael O'Donoghue's Vietnamese baby book. It looked like a real baby book, and they designed it with the right fonts and everything. Before the Lampoon, people sort of did a half-assed effort with parody, and it didn't look so convincingly authentic. And I realized, that makes it like 5 times funnier if you go for that verisimilitude. So that was our big watchword with the videos.
Because that's what I grew up like in high school. I guess I would get National Lampoon magazines at the store or whatever, and every now and it was like for adults, right? So every now and then there would be boobs or something in it. I'd be like, oh my god, like this is unbelievable. And I didn't really have the ability to understand what was like I sort of thought it was real. Like I couldn't, like I just for some reason this still sticks in my head. It was like Ask the Bath Mat, and it was like a column where you're asking a bath mat for advice, and the bath mat gets back. And so I don't think I fully understood it was comedy,
and it was dark. Like there was a fun with AIDS coloring book and stuff. And only looking back at it now do I sort of get what they were doing and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, when you're young, but it was very real, and that was yeah. And then they made their movie. So I guess National Lampoon was kind of like you, like it's paper, but also making movies and Chevy Chase and all of that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow, so cool. So then, did you eventually leave the? I guess you did.
Yeah. So like I said, I left and came back a lot, and I left for the final time in 2014.
Yeah, and then what do you? I mean, I don't like talking about politics, but yeah, it's my show. This is me talking in my tape deck.
Talk about whatever you want. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I've changed a lot. I mean, I've always been very liberal. I ran for the Green Party, and
Oh, good for you.
I couldn't. If I would watch Fox News, I would get very upset. Like I can't do. If it was in a hotel in the States, I'm like whatever. And I don't know if I've changed or if politics has changed. Bill Maher sort of did a big rant in January about no, I haven't changed. The left has changed. Whatever. And I didn't even because I used to think there's no way to be funny like about left-wing stuff. Like you have to make fun of right-wing stuff. That's the only possible way to be amusing. And it seems like it's kind of changed. Like, and I don't know. Like, I'd have to look back at old Onion articles to see if I just was different then or if things have changed. But I feel like the Onion's very, it's progressive now. It makes fun of Republicans. And then now there's the new website, the Babylon Bee, which is kind of the right-wing Onion that just got banned on Twitter. and it would have seemed inconceivable to me to be funny about right-wing stuff. But now it's like, it's almost, to me, it makes more sense. And Bill Maher was just saying, it's, I never used to make fun of the left. People asking, like, why do you do it now? It's like, because they're giving me material now. So do you think, has the Onion kind of become, or was it always like a lot of mainstream media now with kind of a left-wing agenda? Or is it still, because a lot of the stuff isn't political. Like, there's still generic stuff that's like human
Sure.
nature, and that's so true
Yeah.
about whatever. Like, how did that all mix into it?
Well, the real secret recipe to doing political humor that the Onion uses and has always used and still uses, and most successful comedy enterprises use, though with many exceptions, is to not see the political spectrum as left versus right. Because as soon as you do that, you're alienating people because they're very tribal about those things. And, the pendulum has swung really far to the right in America, I assume worldwide. The fact that, we just elected a fascist and we might elect him again, that's pretty serious business. Somebody who would actually encourage his followers to, perform a coup and stop a legitimate election. Like, that's where we're at. And it's terrifying. So despite the fact that the pendulum has swung, and that, like, if you took Dwight Eisenhower and put him in the modern political landscape, he'd be kind of where Bernie Sanders is, and that was a Republican in the 1960s. The way you have to see politics when you do political satire is not left-right, but rich-poor, because the rich are like the 1%, and you're never going to go wrong making fun of the 1%. So when Bill Maher talks about, I'm making fun of the left because they give me material, he's talking about the 1% left, the rich Hollywood elites, the establishment political leaders on the Democratic side, like Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden. These are like, multi-millionaire, corrupt politicians that everybody wants to see made fun of. And that's totally legitimate comedy. Same thing on the right. Obviously, there are plenty of rich pricks on the right as well that you can make fun of. And you can make fun of both sides for their politics, for their out-of-touchness, whatever. But as soon as you start making fun of the poor, people who can't afford health insurance, or people who can't afford to give their kids a good education, that's not funny. Like, nobody's laughing at that. And so, obviously, if you're going to do political comedy, you can't afford to alienate, half of your audience. You have to have this, at least appearance of being an equal opportunity offender. And that's the way to do it, because when you think of the world as separated rich and poor, then it doesn't really matter where the left-right falls, and you can just go ahead and make fun of people. And, there's stupid, dumb people doing stupid, dumb things on all sides of the political spectrum. So it's really the only formula I know of that works. Now, having said that, I do see the late night talk shows and, the Daily Show now with Trevor Noah and stuff like that as having a very establishment democratic bias. They make fun of Trump, and they don't really do a lot to make fun of Biden, at least in terms of his policies. They might make fun of him for being a doddering old fool, but they're not really going to make fun of him for his policies, which I think is a really bad mistake, because a lot of the right-wing audience does feel very alienated by mainstream comedy. But I think the part of the reason why that's happening is because the pendulum has swung so far to the right. It's like, how can you not stand up and make fun of, this fascist? Like, it's almost impossible. How can you not stand up and be counted among the right-thinking people who are on the right side of history,
It's interesting because, we're obviously, because I wasn't sure where you were going to come from. And when you first said, we've just elected this fascist, I'm like, oh, he agrees with me. Joe Biden's a fascist. And then I realized, no, you're talking about Trump. So we're on totally opposite ends of the spectrum. But yeah, like
how is Biden a fascist?
Do you want to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. I wouldn't say. Okay. I mean, I don't think anybody's.
But I'll pause you there and say that I think that the U.S. government, by and large, is very close to fascism in either party, because it's basically at best it's a plutocracy. At worst, it's a kleptocracy, because everybody in politics just takes so much bribe money from big corporations, and they basically only do the bidding of big corporations. And that's on in the Democrat or Republican Party. So in that way, yes, they're all kind of fascists.
It's interesting because I used to, I mean, that would be my thing, that I would have assumed, okay, like every time you see, say like what's the gun lobby, the
NRA.
The NRA would donate to Republicans, and then you'd go, oh, of course, that's why Republicans are supporting guns, because they're paid by the NRA. But I don't know if I read this somewhere or I suddenly realized not necessarily. It's more that businesses or movements will fund the politicians that they think agree with them. So it's,
Exactly.
say Ted Cruz believes in gun rights. It's not that he's beholden to NRA because they donate $100,000. It's because they're donating because they think he's going to back them up. Because I kept thinking, like, people kept saying, oh, yeah, I forget who it was. Like, oh, this politician is just in the pockets of oil companies and stuff. And I was like, well, why don't, all these rich celebrities who are saying that's the problem. I'm like, why don't you donate $100,000 to whoever this politician is? If it's really that easy to say $1 million can completely sway government, then just donate the money and you're done. So that's when I realized, none of that makes sense. It's not that these people are in the pockets. Like, and I've run for office. You can't, I mean, I'm sure there's corruption and secret stuff, but somebody donates to your campaign, that doesn't go into your pocket and now you're buying jets and you're going to, like, it's to fund your advertising and stuff.
It's more systemic than that. So the types of politicians that are going to be kind to corporations are the types of politicians that are going to get funded. So it's same with, like, the media. Like, CNN is going to hire a guy like Anderson Cooper because he's the rich heir of the Vanderbilt fortune. Mm-hmm. And he is never going to rock the boat. He is always going to be pro-advertiser, You would never, and on MSNBC, they had to fire so many anchors who were pro-Bernie Sanders or anti-Iraq war, because that doesn't support their advertisers. Their advertisers are oil companies, pharmaceutical companies. If you piss those people off, you're just not going to have a job. So you're right. I don't think it's that a big oil company pays a politician $100 million, and so the politician says, oh, I guess I better do what they want. But they are making sure to give that money to a politician who is the sort of person who will support big oil companies. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they're looking for the people who. That's why you're funding them, because you think they're
Exactly.
going to do. They believe in what you're doing. I was listening.
Exactly.
I listen. Do you ever listen? Of course you don't. But the Daily Wire, like Ben Shapiro's company.
I mean, I do see that stuff. I'm not a regular. I wouldn't say
Yeah.
I'm a regular listener.
Yeah. So they have a new show, a morning show called Morning Wire, where they give the news in the morning. And today's episode, or yesterday or whatever, was about something called, I forget what it's called, like SEG or something. Like it's this sort of movement that's trying to influence companies from within, so that and they had a Harvard professor explaining the difference, like in a video they were playing, like where there's shareholder influence, but then there's stakeholder, and so stakeholder is more like, oh, you should be representing the whole community and how everything. So there's a lot of and so there's companies like BlackRock, or there's these fund. Anyways, it's kind of like about how it used to be, or maybe it's supposed to be, that companies would be influenced by, okay, well, how do we make the most money? That's our job, and shareholders want us to do that. But now it's more like the boards and the votes are being influenced by activist companies, that even if it's not the best money thing to do, like it's sort of like you get points, like for diversity, for environmentalism, and community something.
No, I think it's all about the money. I think that they have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize profits.
They do legally, but it sounds like they're not doing it. Like, for example, Disney
they're doing it.
would have been better off staying out of the
No, you're not. I think the thing you're missing is that they've done a calculation, and they've realized that the future is in diversity, pro-LGBTQ+, and if you are against that, you're the past, and you're targeting a very small minority of the populace. Look at generation Gen Z. They are incredibly progressive. Like, they're the future. They're the new buying power. They're the prized demographic. Mm-hmm. So if you're anti-LGBTQ, people are going to boycott you. They're not going to, another example is the Colin Kaepernick thing. So Nike decides they're going to hire Colin Kaepernick to be a spokesperson for Nike. Like, they wouldn't do that unless they had done a serious calculation about who's our audience, who buys our shoes. Are they progressive, or are they like these 80-year-old Fox News viewers who think Colin Kaepernick is evil? Well, they did a financial calculation. They said, well, 95% of our audience are the young people who support Colin Kaepernick. So they're not taking a political stance. They're taking a fiduciary stance and saying, we're buying into this audience that believes in these things.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. I feel like there's a bit of that, but there's also, a very loud contingent, like in the way that the loudest people on Twitter get heard, that have sort of, and I mean, I agree that that's the generation, like sort of what people are learning in universities, and now they're the loud people at Disney, and like very progressive, and so they're kind of, they move companies who are like afraid of being seen as, not progressive.
Right.
But whether so,
because they're not progressive, they're all rich old white men. They're all conservatives. The people who are on the boards of these companies, they gain nothing by being progressive for the sake of being progressive. Like, why would they do that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's all interesting, but I guess the only, fair way, or what the Daily Wire says is, all right, well, we're going to compete. We don't agree with what Disney's doing. We're going to start our own children's programming. And so, I mean, I would think that's...
good luck to them. Good luck.
All right. Well, who knows?
They're gonna fall flat on their face, just like Fox News did when they tried to do a conservative daily show on Fox. I think it lasted like an episode and a half.
That was a while ago, though, wasn't it?
Yeah. And then they tried it again recently with Greg Gutfeld, and
I was going to say that's the new one
as well. Yeah.
Really? Because I mean, it's still on YouTube, is it not?
It's roundly hated by everyone in comedy, and even just fans of comedy.
In comedy, but would you say that?
So sad.
Well, I guess there's two layers to that. First of all, yeah, I would say most comedians or people in the entertainment business would be very progressive, so they'd be kind of not on board or think anything's funny either. But there's also the fact that, and that's what some people are saying, or I don't know, maybe I read this somewhere, is that, because most comedians are progressive, then the people on that show aren't going to be the best comedians. So it's kind of
there's an unspoken rule in comedy that if you're a right-winger, you don't talk politics, because audiences are progressive. You know, they don't want to see the downtrodden made fun of. They want to see the rich and powerful made fun of.
Well,
So-
yeah. I mean, you don't want to, and that's rule of comedy. You don't want to punch down. You always
Exactly.
want to be seen punch up. But where the difference is the perception of, well, who is, like, I mean, I guess the traditional, and we're really going to get into it, and I'll get canceled. But the traditional viewpoint would be that the LGBT community is the downtrodden, the marginalized, and that if you make fun of that, you're punching down. That's evil. But the conservative or the more right wing would be like, well, wait a minute, and I'm not saying this is me. I'm just saying this would be the viewpoint that they control things. They have, a very small minority of people can tell Netflix, hey, you've got to cancel this person, or so that if you're disagreeing with what they're saying to the right wing comedian, that would be punching up. So a lot of it isn't. I mean, I know that most people can't see both sides, so they would just assume their side is right, but people view things differently as to who who you're punching up against. Right?
The way people view that is typically very myopic. So people who think that LGBT, or let's say black people, are somehow in power or somehow the powerful and they're okay to make fun of, has no concept of history or reality. Because right now, we have we're like 2 generations away from slavery, and we're less than 1 generation away from even just like gay men, like who are the most privileged among the LGBTQ community, of having of not just getting beaten and strung up on a post for fun. So like that's still a minority, and that's not a powerful group. Again, I think it's when a big company like decides to cancel somebody or whatever, cancel a show because they get too many complaints, they're looking at the broader opinion of the audience. And I think the mistake that the right-wing comedians make who think, oh, maybe I should make fun of trans people because they're so powerful now they can cancel a show on Netflix, they're thinking about it all wrong. Trans people are the most oppressed minority in America, and they literally are not safe. The suicide rate and the murder rate is higher than any group. So that is not a powerful group. That is a very disempowered group. So good comedy comforts the afflicted and afflicts the comfortable. And so you would go after the people who are going after the trans people if you wanted to appeal to the widest possible audience in comedy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I don't even want to really get into this, right? Because if I said anything contrary to what you're saying, I would be destroyed. So it's
I don't understand. You're entitled to your opinion.
Yeah.
And it's your show besides.
No, I mean, I'm not even saying that was my opinion. It's just a difficult thing to argue. It's a risk. You basically, if I said anything against what you're saying, I would be saying, putting myself in, okay, well, I'm Ben Shapiro now. Like, this is the world I live in, rather than being part of the main discourse. It's interesting.
Yeah, so, Ben Shapiro obviously has a lot of fans and a lot of people who like him. I happen to think he's a complete idiot who talks fast, and that makes him seem smart. But I just think he's on the wrong side of everything. I've never heard him express an opinion that, oh yeah, that's smart. I totally get that.
Yeah,
he just talks. And I listen to his radio show. Like I love listening to these people because it's fascinating to me how they think and how they can like wrap their brains around certain ideas that, in my opinion, like I'm a realist, like I'm a scientist. So when it comes to comedy, I'm looking at how audiences react, because that's a science experiment. You can't control an audience, and audiences are progressive. Like they like to see the powerful brought down, and they like to see the weak raised up, and they have an inherent sense of who is weak and who is powerful. So there are ways in comedy that you can recontextualize certain groups as powerful, like you're talking about. You could take, like gay men, for example, and if there's a powerful group of gay men, I don't know who that would be, or if it's the log cabin Republicans, or I don't know who it would be, but you could possibly contextualize that, or women, who is another. Hold on a second, just had a weird thing come on my screen. Women are another oppressed minority who are in almost no positions of power in America. So anyone who looks at the scene objectively and thinks that, oh, women have just as much power as men in society is fooling themselves. Put yourselves in the shoes of a woman or a gay person or a trans person or a black person, and you'll quickly see how minute by minute your life is so removed from the life of a privileged, white male, for example, cis white male like myself. And audiences have an inherent sense of understanding that, and they know when you're going after an undeserving target, and they don't like it. They don't laugh. So it's really just a reality of society. It's not necessarily my opinion, because where would I be if I just was spouting my opinion without any evidence based on the audience reaction,
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this, and this is not I'm not saying it's right either way, but what would you say to somebody who's saying, okay, you're saying that, like black women are oppressed and have no power, and then you would, the contrary argument might be, well, okay, the vice president is a black woman, they just nominated or just elected or whatever it's called, named a black woman to the Supreme Court.
That is a hilarious argument.
Both specifically because they are black
Here's why.
women. Yeah.
Here's why. Imagine the tables are turned,
Yep.
and black women have been the most powerful group in society for hundreds of years. They colonized America. They killed a bunch of Indians. They took slaves from Europe and brought them to America to be slaves for them. And these are white men who are their slaves, and black women are in power. And so then a particular black female president in the 1800s decides to emancipate these white slaves. So they now are no longer slaves, but they're definitely second-class citizens. And a lot of laws continue to keep them as second-class citizens. And there's a ton of lynchings where white males are getting lynched and killed, and white women are being raped. And all this time, every president is a black woman. Every senator is a black woman. Everyone in power, every CEO is a black woman. And then in the 1950s and 60s, one brave white man decides we should have rights. We should be able to vote. We shouldn't be second-class citizens. And all the black women in charge begrudgingly say, oh, okay, we'll pass a civil rights law and you can have a few more rights, and maybe we won't lynch you as much. We'll make it a hate crime or whatever the case. Then in the year 2022, one white male becomes the vice president. Would you then say, oh, it's all fair now, everything's good, we're good? And one white male becomes a Supreme Court justice after all the other Supreme Court justices were black women. Yeah, we're good now. No, there's no more racism. No, it's systemic, it's built in, and those things die very, very slowly. I think it's tremendous progress that we have a black woman vice president and a black woman on the Supreme Court. I think it's good for a little black girl to see that kind of representation. But it's identity politics at the end of the day. It doesn't really mean anything. But what it does is it kind of breaks a barrier so that maybe in the future it won't be such a thing. We can, who knows, in some century, many generations from now, be post-racial and it won't matter. But at this point, it really does matter. The history matters and the context matters. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, no, it's interesting to hear. I mean, I know I'm familiar with the perspective, and it's interesting to hear it. And then, the right would argue, well, what about Clarence Thomas? He was black, or he is black, but he doesn't count because he's right wing.
One black person on the Supreme Court after generations of only white men on the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. It's like a blip. It's a blip.
Okay, yeah. All right. Well, that's yeah, I like hearing. I mean, what I pride myself on, or what I like to think, is that I can see both sides, and so I like to discuss it and try to have a discussion where it's not all one or the other.
Yeah, no, I do the same. That's why I like to listen to like Ben Shapiro's show and stuff like that. I love to hear any opinion, any perspective on an issue.
Yeah, because I remember when Trump was elected, there's a photo of me online, like sitting in a pub watching it, going, "Oh my God, my stomach's upset. I can't believe this. This is awful." But then, and I just, once I started looking at the news coverage of him, I just felt, wait a minute, this isn't true. They're not saying true things. Like, and I just sort of, I guess it awakened me to, I don't know, I just became aware of both sides, and I looked into both, and I watched a bit of Fox, I watched a bit of CNN, and I can see, I mean, I'm also, I took psychology. I like to think I can think rationally and see through cognitive biases and stuff. So I don't think a lot of people can do that, or they can't necessarily read an article and realize what's being left out or what the spin is. So I wish, not to be vain, but I wish more people were like me and could sort of understand both perspectives rather than just, because I've always been, been very progressive and just like I believed the narrative that if you're against this, if you're the right, you're evil. If you oppose abortion, then it's because you want to control women and you hate women, not that, maybe you consider fetuses babies and you just think it's wrong. Like, so there's a lot of things where, or if you're an oil company, you're evil. It's not that you're just providing energy that people need, it's that you deliberately want to destroy the earth, kind of thing. Like I was trained by Al Gore at his climate reality training a few years ago. So it's not like I'm in this world that, I have no idea the progressive side. It's just
there's a lot of things working against us, not only cognitive bias, but tribalism and propaganda, so the media is so good at propagandizing. So when people only listen to one type of media, and obviously we're all siloed in these media bubbles wherever we are, we're just getting this propaganda over and over and over. And some of it's just completely false. And people are walking around with these completely false ideas in their heads that are reinforced by their cognitive bias and by their tribalism. So it's almost impossible to get them out of it.
Yeah, it's an echo chamber, especially on social media. If you click on one, if I click on a Fox News video, now I'm going to get Fox News feeds.
Right.
Conversely, MSNBC, CNN, that kind of stuff, you're going to be in your Twitter bubble.
Yep.
And even Twitter is famous for, I mean, I don't think you can deny that they would try to censor the right-wing perspective. So now Elon Musk is on the board, and everybody's like, oh, yeah, they're scared of that. So it's all interesting. And then I guess Trump's got his own, I don't know if it's launched, or I think it's by invite only or something, like Truth Social, kind of his own Facebook.
Yeah, I think Truth Social is already crashing and burning, if I'm not mistaken.
So that's why, when people were like, why don't you talk about politics in your show? I'm like, I could. I could try to be the low-rent Ben Shapiro or the guy that's, and I don't even know, there's probably not a market at all for, I'm going to be the guy that's open-minded and talks to both conservatives and progressives or whatever. Like, I don't know who the hell I would just be, maybe, whatever.
Yeah,
but I also wanted to be the guy that, I like Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi, and I want to be a guy who just teaches self-help tips and not, James Altucher, he doesn't really talk politics. He'll interview somebody about the history of the Ukraine because he wants to understand it. Mm-hmm. But I feel it would be difficult to be somebody who's like, hey, I like talking about comedy and living your best life, and also every now and then I dip into trans rights or something. Like, it's gonna, you can't really be the guy that's, but you could, I don't know.
Yeah,
but then it gets into self-censorship. If I'm going to be the guy with my tape deck, do whatever you want, right? I guess.
Right, yeah. No, you should do whatever you want. I talk about whatever I want on my little show. I do politics. I do just observational humor.
Yeah, I was going to ask. Like, so you talk for, like, somebody was asking me last night in my comedy class, like, what's a podcast? Like, does it have to be interviews? I'm like, no. Like, Bill Burr just rants for half an hour on his own.
Yep.
So that's difficult to do. Is that what you're doing? Just talking to your camera, to yourself?
Pretty much, yeah. And I do have some like prepared jokes and bits. I have an outline of what I'm talking about, on every show. And then I do animation. I animate like little skits, and I do impressions, and I tell stories and stuff. So yeah, it's a whole little. It's like I think of it as, or I call it a cross between The Daily Show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and A Prairie Home Companion.
Like that would be my dream. And I mean, obviously we're similar in that, you know, as a kid, if I had a camera, like that would be me. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna act out something. You know, like every now and like I'll think of Robin Williams and Mrs. Doubtfire just playing with his little dolls doing his kids show. You know,
no, it's very fun, and it strikes me as, because I do a lot of stuff on stage too, and that obviously is considered by most people in comedy to be the ultimate crucible, you know, to go up and do stand up. And to me, like, doing this show is even harder because there's no audience, there's no laugh track, so there's no social proof of anything that I'm saying being funny. It's just me for 20 minutes, you know.
Yeah.
And I I listen to Bill Burr's Monday morning podcast also, and it is really interesting because you get to hear how his mind works and how he sort of formulates bits or things. He talks way too much about sports for me, so I kind of had to give up on it, but I do like the idea of it. So I wanted to do something that was a little more polished, a little more prepared than just, you know, ranting about whatever. But, you know, and we'll see where it goes.
Like your animated part, like do you animated part? Do you animate it beforehand and then cut to your cartoon? Or are you drawing it as you're doing it?
I do the performance and do all the voices and the audio first, and then I go and animate it and do all the post-production after. And then I'll animate a little bit and then I'll cut back to me, you know, so it's unusual and it's different than anything I've seen, and maybe that means it's completely doomed. I don't know, but I'm just kind of like doing the show that I would like to see. Yeah. And
so
what else would you do, you know?
So it's edited, like you'll
yeah.
So it's not just you for 20 minutes talking. It's like, here's my joke of the day, and now here's a little animated clip, and now back to me.
I do need to think about transitions, because right now I just go from one thing to the other, and it might be a little jarring. But again, you start something like this, you learn, and you figure out, oh yeah, this is an improvement I could make. Yeah. And so I'm probably going to be doing something like that. But yeah, so like you were saying before, you talk to your friend for an hour on the phone. Why not just record it and put it out on a podcast? Yeah. Like sometimes I'll just have funny thoughts, and I'll just like record them into my voice recorder, and it'll be like 20 minutes of me ranting about zoos, you know. How stupid are zoos? It's a prison for animals, and we're going to look at the prisoners? That's fun? I don't get it. And there's cotton candy? It doesn't make any sense. So instead of just recording it into my voice recorder, I figured, well, I'll just do it on video, and I'll turn it into a show, and I'll make a thing out of it, you know. So it's a natural outgrowth of like what I would do anyway.
It's a good idea, because yeah, like for my stand-up ideas, like I use voice memo, so I'll like just because I find that I think of an idea and I'm like, oh, I'll write it down later. In 3 minutes, it's gone, and I can't even remember what it was. So I'll just quickly, even if I'm on a jog, I'll record myself saying, oh, it's you know, when I get the freshness packet out of beef jerky, it's such a refreshing thing, and then I write it down later. But it would be interesting because I've tried that a couple of times on Instagram. Like I'm like out and I'm like, oh, I brought a jacket, but now it's too hot. I'm going to do a 1 minute rant about why didn't I look at the weather beforehand or whatever. And that could be a thing, but then it goes to your Instagram story or whatever and sort of disappears. But if you took those clips from the week and said, here's my, you know, here's a 10-minute compilation of my little rants, and then it'd be interesting, especially like if you're a comedian professional like yourself, like people could watch and go, oh, and that was the genesis of it, and now I saw that in a stand-up act later, or that became a movie.
And I need to get better at that. Like I started doing that, but then I went on vacation. I kind of been offline, but doing those little Instagram reels or whatever where I have the initial thought and then I can refine it and work it into my little show. Yeah, that's definitely something I want to do more of. And
that's
TikTok, another great place for that.
Yeah, because that's what they say, you know, Facebook is going hard on Reels now. Like, that's what they're pushing. And Instagram Reels and TikTok.
They're like, so addictive.
They're addictive. Like, 'cause you can't even get out of it. If I open my phone, I'm like, I want to check my oh, what is this? Oh, now it's a Reel. And I'm like, it's 2 hours later. What the hell?
It's the worst. Yeah, they really know. They've got, it's the heroin of media at this point, Reels.
So that's why I'm like, why even bother posting a photo or a video? Like, just give them the 10-second vertical video that Instagram wants. And that's why I was even thinking for this podcast, what's great about Riverside, use my affiliate link below, is that like it's recording us side by side now. But I emailed them and I said, what if I want to do like a vertical video, like interview somebody for a 1-minute reel? And they're like, oh, you can take the two things and make it vertical. Like I can do whatever I want with this, or I could have it
amazing.
me big and then it gets bigger, who is depending on speaking. So I could take a little, and maybe in the future I'll plan out, okay, what's a 1-minute reel we're going to do? Or if I wanted to go back in this interview and find the 1-minute clip and post that as a reel, but then it becomes a whole thing. It's like I'll have to listen back to 2 hours of stuff. And
oh no, all that stuff takes so much time. Like that's the problem. That's why you need to like bake it into your life. So when you have the thought, instead of making the voice memo, just make a reel.
Yes,
and
that's brilliant. Brilliant.
Then it's part of your life, and you don't have to do all this work. Like even just like taking my show and clipping out excerpts and putting them on social media is such a pain in the ass. Like I'd rather not do that. And
I can't. I don't
need to. Yeah,
I know, but I don't want to. Like I'm still like I've been looking for guests for my podcast, and people are commenting, well, you haven't uploaded one since December. I'm like, because I've got 4 that I've done that I need to upload, and partly I need to write the description and get it up. That'll take a bit of time, but it's also stopping me. I'm like, but I want to go through it and find that 1-minute clip to make a reel saying, here's a clip, listen to the whole episode somewhere else. I don't want to do that.
It's a lot of work. Yeah.
It's too much work. And even for editing, people say, why don't you edit your podcast? I'm like, you know what? For the 5% better it might be if I edited it, it's not worth it because I'll never do it. So like I just want to do raw, and that's what people want now anyway. So why not, instead of like, I'm going to write down ideas and film a skit with people? No, just go through your life, and every time I see, and that's actually what went viral on Instagram a while ago. Or got 5,000 views or something at the beginning of it. Like I was like, look at, there's some a chicken wing box on the ground on my jog. If that's there tomorrow, I'm gonna eat the chicken wings. And the next day I'm like, I'm gonna eat the chicken wings, and it's empty, whatever. And that was just like a thought, but that's kind of caught on, like, and then it's done, because by the time you're like, I'm gonna edit it or film it later, like
too much.
No, you just put it on your phone, make a reel. It's a 1-minute thing. And again, why self-censor? Like, people are just posting garbage. Like, if people don't want to watch it, I mean, that's what Gary Vee would say. Like, post 4 times a day, just churn it out. You need to post. People are only going to see like 1% of what you post anyways. You just need to crank it out.
Exactly.
And anything that you do is going to be probably, I don't even want to say better than other people. It's just different. Like, it'll be your tribe will find you.
It's your voice. Yeah, it's your unique voice.
Yeah, and
that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad
and
you're
ultimately
doing.
That's where there's no competition. Like nobody's your voice. Yeah, nobody's you. So
that's the thing. That's what all the gurus say. They say your unique thing is that, whether you're the best, I shouldn't do my podcast. I'm not the best life coach, or I'm not the best financial. Yeah, but there's nobody with your voice. So like, even if I'm trying to teach people things, there's a tribe out there that, okay, maybe people want to learn from Tony Robbins, but there's a tribe that wants to learn from me. And like, here's somebody who's figuring things out as he goes along, and that's where they are, and that's what they want to do. Or they find your sense of humor funny, but not somebody else. Like, Stephen Colbert's not going to stop doing his show because I'm not interested in watching it anymore. Like, and even things change. Like Russell Brand was probably very progressive, and he's getting a bit more, wait a minute, there's 2 sides to the stories now on YouTube. And every time he does his show, he's like, welcome 5.4 million people. Like, he raises the number every time because people are subscribing more and stuff. And you just do your thing. And if people want to cancel you and hate you, I mean, I guess that's their right. I don't know.
Like, you get to a certain level, and you're gonna have a percentage of people who just hate your guts, and there's no avoiding that.
And it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're Will Smith or like, it's
absolutely.
Yeah, so you just keep doing your thing. And then what I hope to do to make myself feel better is like, there'll be the haters on the internet doing their thing. But if I get to spend an hour talking to somebody like you, at least I'm like, hey, we may disagree on things, but I'm having a good conversation, and hopefully we're friends now. And that at least I feel like, hey, there's one person in the world that I can feel good, that we have a good relationship, and screw everybody else kind of thing. So it's like,
Yeah, I the way I think of haters is, for every hater, you have 50 fans, because haters don't come immediately. They come after you've gotten a little bit of traction. So the ratio that I go with, that I think is pretty accurate, is once you get 50 fans who really like what you do, you're likely to get 1 hater. So anytime I get a new hater, I get excited because I'm like, hey, that means I have 50 new fans,
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I wish... But, I mean, it's just psychologically, our brain is wired to look for the negative. There might be 100 people telling you you're great, and then one person says, it's crap, and that's what sticks in your head, because that's how we evolve.
you have to do that reframing, and you have to love it for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, yeah.
So that voice doesn't really matter to you. It's like, well, so you don't like it, so you're not my audience. Big deal. Like, nice knowing you, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, there's because Daily Wire has a number of people. There's Ben Shapiro, there's Michael Knowles, there's Matt Walsh. He's a funny guy. Like, you know, you'll disagree with everything he says, but he's...
I do, yeah, generally.
Have you seen this guy, Matt Walsh?
Yeah, I've seen his stuff.
But would you agree that he's... Well, I don't know. I'm interested. Would you agree that he's funny? That he can be funny?
I've never seen him be funny, but that doesn't mean he can't be.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it depends on whether you're even at all open to what he's saying. But he's very dry, and his whole thing is sort of judo moves. Like, okay, you're my hater? Well, I'm going to... Like, he'll troll people. He'll make, put books on Amazon or whatever. But and whether he actually feels this way or not, his persona is, I'm confident... I love the haters. Bring them on. I'm going to take on you. And even last night, there was this comedian I watched live, Andrew Gross, not political, but his whole thing, he's sarcastic. So his whole thing is like, my daughter's a B word and my son's an a-hole. And obviously he doesn't really mean that, but he's kind of the gruff dad guy. Like, I woke up and my 5-year-old daughter's standing there and she's like, I'm late for school. And he's like, like any dad, I'm like trying to figure out, well, how does this affect me? It's like, Daddy, you have to drive me. It's like, like that kind of persona which I'm jealous of that. I wish I could be that guy that's like, hey, haters, screw you. But I'm very sensitive inside, and I feel like I want to be. So my comedy is all the opposite. It's all beating myself up, and, I'm trying to do my best, but, I screwed up again.
Yeah, you're talking about comedic archetypes. I wrote this whole book, How to Write Funny Characters, which breaks down the 40 most popular comedic archetypes. And you just described the grump, the crank, which is what that other guy is, and then either the neurotic or the sad sack that you described as your own persona. Yeah, those people love those personas. Like, they both work.
Hopefully. Like, when I was in grade 3 or something, I remember a girl came up to me and she's like, my dad says you remind him of Woody Allen. I'm like, who's Woody Allen? But then the older I got, I was like, oh, Jesus, I do look like Woody Allen. Like, at the time when I was 20, I looked like 40-year-old Woody Allen, and now you can't even say Woody Allen because he's kind of canceled or whatever his issues are. But that's kind of always what I aspired to be. Kind of like when I would watch his movies, I'm like, that's what I think. Like, woe is me. Or Larry David, he's a bit harsher version of what I thought was me.
He's like a mix between a crank and a neurotic.
Yeah. So it's like, he's a bit of exaggerated, but... And I wish, I'm even jealous of him, like, going around, like, his persona and Curb Your Enthusiasm. Like, this is my opinion, and I'm going to get into fights with people. And I'm like, I couldn't do that, but I wish I could be that guy, just not caring and whatever. But I guess everybody's got their own thing. So what's next for Scott? You've got your show. You're plugging anything right now? Books or movies or what?
No, the show is my latest project, so I'm plugging the show.
And so what do you do? Is that audio or it's video? Where do you put it?
It's a video. It's on all the podcast platforms, and it's on YouTube.
So it's a video... Wait, so it's a video on podcast platforms?
Yeah, Apple Podcasts can host video and audio podcasts.
What? Yeah, is that how new is that? Have I been missing out?
I don't know. But yeah, YouTube is the main place I put it because YouTube... I feel like YouTube is the best search engine, and it's the most popular place for people to find entertainment. So.
Yeah, they say it's the number 2 search engine after Google, which is also owned by Google, but people search for.
Yeah, but then it's also, and I've been looking at the numbers on the podcast platforms, like Spotify or Apple Podcasts and all that stuff, and people are finding it. That's the crazy thing about podcasts. Like, people will find it. You put it out there, and it's like...
That's the thing. Like, I look at my stats, and, like, I get maybe... And again, I haven't been consistent. I've posted, like, one episode every 5 months, so I'm not anything. But if I look at my stats, maybe it's got 10 viewers or listeners, but I'll be like, how am I big in Ireland? Or, like, what one person in Iceland listened to this? And it's like, somehow it got discovered, and it's just interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so...
And how do you choose your category, too? Because that's what I'm all obsessed with. Like, should I be a self-help podcast? Should I be in comedic interviews? Like, what the hell? Because that's how people find it.
Yeah, my How to Write Funny podcast is comedic interviews, and then my other podcast is just comedy. So that's pretty easy for me.
And did you ever consider, because that's what I've been wondering too, like if I want to talk about politics, maybe I should start a second podcast. But then I'm like, I barely do this one. Should I be spreading myself thin? Did you ever consider just be like, all right, I'm going to go all in on this one podcast, and in some episodes are me ranting?
I could have done that. It might have been a wise thing to do because I already have a pretty big audience for that first podcast. But I feel like people who listen to that podcast want to hear interviews with comedians. They want to learn how to write comedy better.
Yeah.
They aren't necessarily interested in a comedy show, So
Yeah.
I'll promote the new podcast on the old podcast and make people aware of it, but I'm not going to like change the old podcast into something that people don't expect. I think that would be too much.
No, I think it's good because I used to think for all of this stuff, it's like, oh, it's just me. I'm the common denominator. People love me.
Right.
But no, I love me, and maybe, but that's not how people discover things. Like if I'm scrolling through, I feel like listening to a podcast about how to make money from affiliates or whatever. Then that's what they're searching for, financial advice, and then
right.
or it's or even on YouTube, like, and I think about even the YouTubers I like, because Phil DeFranco used to talk about like until you have 100,000 followers, don't start another channel. But not necessarily, because if I'm looking for, the second I watch a video about Star Wars mythology or something, now it'll show me all the other Star Wars videos,
Right.
and that's how you get discovered. So if I want to do a show about, I'm Tony Robbins' self-help tips, okay, then people will find me in that feed. If I'm going to start ranting about politics, then start another politics YouTube channel and let people, maybe if they like you, they'll look that up. But that's not how they're, so it's not a bad thing. And I used to think, you can't divide yourself up. But even Instagram, if I want to, like, think about what people are looking for. If I'm posting half my stuff is like, here's different restaurants I'm eating at, and then half the stuff is my comedic rant, it's not the same audience necessarily.
Exactly.
So make a foodie Instagram and make your comedic rant reels Instagram and make one that's your personal life if people care about that. So I think what you're doing is right, like dividing
I think
up.
so. I mean, we'll see, time will
Because that's a
tell.
very different audience. Like if I'm a comedian who wants to learn how to write comedy, that's an audience, but people who just want to laugh at something.
Totally
two
different audience.
Yeah. Well, that's so cool. And, can I ask? Well, I'll ask you later, but I was just wondering what podcast service you use, or like
We can
your
talk
host.
about it. I don't mind it. I use Libsyn for everything.
That's the big one that I've heard. Like it's kind of like the Nike of.
I've been using it for my old podcast for years. I started that podcast way back in like 2014 or 15.
Yeah.
So it works. It's never conked out on me. So why change?
And it's not hard to just go between. Okay, and now this is my other show and flip.
Yeah,
back and forth.
they redesigned Libsyn. I hate when websites redesign things. I get so accustomed to the interface, and they redesign. I have to relearn everything. It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
But the new interface is very user friendly, and you just switch between the two podcasts really easy.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And does it offer transcription possibilities? Like here's a printout of your.
That I don't know, but the great thing about YouTube, post your podcast to YouTube, and just create subtitles. YouTube automatically generates the subtitles. You can just copy them, and you've got your transcription.
Oh, great! Yeah, and I've been using I don't know, like Simplecast, but then somebody in a Facebook group is like, oh, you should try. I can't remember what it was.
Rev.com.
Maybe it wasn't Rev, but it's another one that offers free transcriptions and free extra shows. But then there was another one so I got an email from Acast saying switch over to us, and we have transcriptions as well, and apparently that's good for SEO. But I mean, how many people are Googling a topic and then going to find a transcription of your podcast?
I know that's a really very low leverage thing to spend any time on, in my opinion.
Yeah, like is Joe Rogan worried about people randomly coming across his show because they Googled a word that shows up and
Crazy.
So maybe have you seen how many listeners you get or whatever? Like, does it keep you going?
So my YouTube numbers are the ones that I watch for the most part.
Yeah.
And so I started out on a channel that had like 100 subscribers, just a channel I've had for a long time where I've just put short films or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that's gone up, it's at 250 now. So that's growing pretty well. And then the podcast numbers, I don't know, it seems like it's about 100 to 300 people a week are getting it. So that's good. And, as long as I guess that whole theory of like doing it because you love it.
Yeah.
That's tough when you're starting out and literally there's zero audience, you know, like if
Yeah.
you don't have anybody watching, then you really have to put yourself in the mindset of, I'm just doing this in front of the mirror and this is just me, you know,
Yeah.
discovering myself or whatever. But, you know, when I start to, like, I'm an entertainer at heart and I like to make things that people like. I
Yeah.
want to know that what I'm doing is working and people are actually responding. So in a way, I'm much more like a stand-up comedian. I want to hear the audience laughing and I want to know they're laughing. So
It's very different. That's the thing. I love, you know, being in front of it, even just for my class shows, hearing an audience laugh. Like, that's such a rush. It's very different to be like, I'm making a TikTok video. I hope it gets some views or whatever.
yeah, and since I've been working in print and on the Onion for most of my career, like I never heard the laughs, you know.
Yeah.
I could never hear those. And I only started doing stage stuff around 2010, I would say. I started going out and on the lecture circuit doing speeches, you know, representing the Onion, doing comedy speeches. It's basically like an hour of stand-up. And then I started doing more actual stand-up where I'd go to open mics and I'd go to clubs and stuff. And it's such a different muscle. But now I use them all because I don't have a live audience for this podcast. So I have to go back into that part of the brain that did Onion articles. And it's like, well, I just have to do my best to make this funny and do the timing in such a way that I think will elicit the most laughs and hope it works, you know?
Because it's almost hard to, like, to even listen to comedy without the audience laughing. Like, I think back when I was a kid, I would listen to Dr. Demento radio, and it was like comedy skits,
Yeah.
or I'd listen to Four on the Floor, or even Monty Python, and it's like, I guess it's a different thing. Like, I do like Curb
It's a
Enthusiasm,
different
but
thing.
there's no laugh track, so it's...
Yeah, I tend to enjoy no laugh track more.
No, I don't like
So-
laugh tracks, but it's
No, I mean
definitely...
even live audience. Like
Right, okay.
the live audience definitely artificially influences you. It makes it seem funnier than it really is. I sometimes will watch a stand-up special and I'll try to erase the laughter and just listen to the jokes. And oftentimes I'll be sitting there thinking, none of this is funny. Like, none of this is well written. None of this works. The people are laughing because they like this person. They're in a big theater with a bunch of people laughing. And I loved, like, the Larry Sanders Show, which was super funny, didn't have a laugh track. I love Curb Your Enthusiasm, same thing. And do you know Harry Shearer's show, Le Show, that he's been doing for, like, 40 years?
No,
It's,
what?
Yeah, it's on... what's the radio station in Santa Monica?
Well, I wouldn't know. But that's my dream. I want to live in Santa Monica, and I want to be a radio host, so I should look that up.
Yeah, Le Show, Harry Shearer.
And he's
Why
the
can't I think of the
Simpsons
call letters?
voiceover guy?
Yes, he did
Yeah.
all those Simpsons voice. So
Let me-
he does a show very similar to mine. He talks about politics, talks about what he's thinking, observational humor. He does skits, he does voices, and there's no audience. It's just him talking in a microphone and doing fairly well-produced skits.
Here, I'm just Googling him. Radio, Le Show on, I don't know. What radio station is it?
It is KCRW, Santa Monica.
KCRW, Santa Monica. I mean, that is my ultimate fantasy. When I visited a girl when I was working on a screenplay 12 years ago or something, I wanted to finish it, and so she said, come stay in my apartment, and I'll go. She worked in insurance for film, and so she'd come home at the end of the day and look at my script and whatever. And we were in the car once listening to some guy, and he was kind of a, I don't know, I don't even know if it was right wing, probably a bit, but more like a gruff, like radio veteran, shock jock type of guy, and then he lost his show or whatever. But she would tell me how, oh yeah, he's really rich, and everybody knows this guy, and whatever, and I was just like, imagine having a radio show in L.A., so like all the celebrities know you when they're in their cars, they're listening to it, and Santa Monica's my favorite part of L.A. Like, my dream is to live in a mansion overlooking the water and go for a walk every night on Santa Monica Beach. I don't even know if there are houses on the beach, but that's
Sure,
what I want.
yeah.
And so,
That sounds like a great dream.
yeah, and to be Harry Shearer and just to go, you know, that sounds like Robin Williams in Good Morning Vietnam. Just like, okay, good morning, everybody, I'm being funny. And maybe you have your, you know, like Howard Stern would have a couple people he's doing it with, so at least they're his laugh track to bounce off and stuff. So I could have, You know,
I didn't even want those people. Those people bother me, like the crew that laughs.
Or even on a talk, like Conan O'Brien would have Andy Richter or whatever sitting beside him,
But he wasn't a laugher. Andy Richter wasn't. He wasn't an Ed McMahon.
Yeah, I was going to say Ed McMahon because
He's the worst.
I'm trying to think of whether I don't even know if I can picture actual Ed McMahon, but I can picture who's the guy? Phil Hartman. Did he play
Playing
him on
Ed
TV?
McMahon.
Like,
He sure
ha,
did, yeah.
yes, sir, ha ha! Like sort of the spoof of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't want your yes man sitting there. But a lot of do you ever watch? And you can go and we can end this anytime you want. I know I'm monopolizing your time, but
I have a thing in about 10 minutes, so I do need to go. But
okay.
ask your last question.
Yeah, just Andrew Schultz. Is that his name? Who's
comedian, yeah.
Like he's got a podcast called Flagrant 2. I don't know why, but he has sort of his panel of comedians that he'll sit with 2 or 3 of them and just riff about politics.
And he's really prolific on social media. He does really good work.
Yeah, he's on top of it, and then a lot of clips of him crowd work and destroying the audience or whatever. And
exactly.
Yeah, so that's that's another way to do it, to sit with your 2 buddies in your studio and just riff and whatever.
And some people like that. I don't like listening to that. That bothers me. It makes me feel like I'm at a party. I just want to hear one person in a enclosed tube talking their thoughts. That's more comforting to me than hearing a conversation where people are all trying to be funny with each other.
Yeah, and you're also, you'd be like a scientist, like you're a scholar of comedy, so you want to hear, you're looking at, okay, how did Larry David structure that? And I imagine most of the people watching Andrew would be like, I want to be one of those bros sitting there with the bros and just riffing, and then there's right-wing versions of that too, the Louder with Crowder with his crew of, it's like a morning zoo kind of thing.
Oh
but
yeah, those people are insufferable.
Yeah, not your thing, but
not my thing.
Things for other people. That's why it's good that there's YouTube and we can all watch whatever we want. Well, great. Thanks so much for making my dream of talking to the Onion guy come true.
It's been my pleasure, Josh. Thanks for having me.
All right, and we'll do this every day, and it'll be our regular show.
Just like Bill Burr.
Exactly. All right. Well, thanks so much, and I will let you know when this is posted, and it's going to be soon. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I got to get on top of those backlogged episodes.
Well, I feel like you might be like the tipping point for me. People are like, oh God, you had Scott Dikkers on. All right, I guess you're legit.
Well,
and now because you remind me of a bit of do you know Dave? Sorry, I'm letting you go, but David Rosenberg, is that his name? Like he used to fill in for Johnny Carson.
That name does not ring a bell.
It's a Jewish name, David Steinberg.
David Steinberg. I know David Steinberg. Yeah, great comedian.
Yes.
Directed a lot of TV, Seinfeld episodes, stuff like that.
Yeah, so just I feel, because I know I talked to him on the phone in L.A. a few years ago, and he's got a show where he interviews the greats like Robin Williams, Seinfeld,
he knows
whoever.
Everybody. Yeah,
he knows everybody, but nobody would really know him. Right, so I feel like you remind me a bit of you've been behind the scenes, The Onion. Like they might not necessarily know you, but you probably have all the comedy connections, and it'd be like, whoa, who is this guy?
I'm definitely one of those people. Yeah, behind the scenes people.
Cool. Well, everybody subscribe to both his podcasts, or one, or whatever, and then we'll hopefully we'll have you on again soon, and whatever.
Awesome. Well, good luck with everything you got going on, Josh, and I wish you a great day.